Welcome back to the shop, everybody. Now today's video is going to be about my 2005 Toyota Tacoma pickup truck. Now ever since I bought that truck, I knew this day was coming. I need to tackle one of the biggest jobs that can be done to that pickup truck. I absolutely love this Tacoma. I don't daily drive it, but I drive it whenever I can, and honestly, it's just a fun little truck. I kind of call it my adventure Tacoma. It's not really built for hardcore rock crawling, but it's a great kind of like low-key overlander, or at least what I would consider my version of an overlander. But there's been a problem with that truck, like I said, since the day that I bought it, and that problem is that my frame looks like this. So what do you do if you have a Tacoma with a rotten frame? Well, you have a couple of options. You can either repair it or you can replace it. And that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna do a complete frame replacement on this 2005 Toyota Tacoma, and we're gonna talk about all the different options that you have out there for that frame replacement. But first, let's grab some coffee. Now, before we start tearing this truck apart, let's talk about why we have to do this job. Now, there is kind of like this dirty little secret that Toyota Tacoma owners don't want to talk about, and that is the number of frames that Toyota has had to replace over the years because they just basically rust out or possibly sometimes even bend or break in half due to that metal fatigue. Now, I can only speculate why this is an issue with the Tacoma. I assume it's because there was probably a problem with the metallurgy when they were making those frames, and possibly there wasn't enough rust preventative put into the steel, or maybe it was a coating issue. But either way, Tacomas are known throughout the world for having a problem with the frames. Now, this was such an issue that Toyota actually addressed this with, in the world of OEs that I worked for, we called it a special policy. So a special policy, it's not a recall. It doesn't mean that the vehicle must be repaired. What it is the dealership or the OE knows that there is a problem, and if the customer complains about it, they'll fix it for free. So Toyota put basically what would be termed as a special policy into place for all of the Tacoma frames. Now, I've done a lot of research, and I've got like 3 or 4 different feedbacks, and I even contacted my local dealer, and they really weren't that much help for me because they didn't want to fix the truck. But this is basically what it boiled down to. Toyota would replace your frame if you complained about it and could show damage to it within sometimes 10, sometimes 12, and then I've heard it's up to 15 years from its initial use. So in the case of this truck, it's a 2005. So if between 2005 and 2020, the owner of that vehicle had gone to Toyota and said, hey, look, my frame is completely rusted out, then the dealership would then do a complete frame replacement for you for free. Now, I am obviously outside of that window, even if you look at the 15 years. Also, I did call my local Toyota dealer, gave them my VIN number, and they told me there was nothing they could do for me. So I knew that I was going to be on the hook for fixing this myself. Now, how do you fix it? Well, that's where things get a little bit tricky, and that is where I am super thankful for companies like today's video sponsor. I'm partnering with eBay Motors for this Tacoma frame swap video because honestly, eBay Motors is my #1 destination to find parts. People ask me all the time, where should I get an LS engine for my swap? Where should I get axles for my axle swaps? And I tell them all the time, the first place to look is eBay Motors for many different reasons. #1, you're dealing with reputable sellers. You're not gonna have someone who sells you something just, in an alley that you have to go meet somewhere and they throw in the back of your truck, and then you get back and you find out that maybe the bearings were bad in the axle, or maybe you thought you bought a Dana 60 and you ended up with a Dana 50, which has happened to me in the past. So you're dealing with reputable sellers, so if there is an issue, eBay Motors is there to make it right. But more importantly, just the wealth of knowledge that's actually on that site. You can use eBay Motors almost like a parts catalog. So that is what I did. So when you look at stuff on eBay, you can actually look through and it'll show you basically what vehicle that part fits. So I went through and looked at a lot of different frames to see which ones would fit, and sure enough, some of them would show up that they would fit a 4x4 and a 4x2 Toyota Tacoma. It took some hunting, but I found them. That is when I realized, okay, wait a minute, something is gone crazy here inside the Toyota world, and I kind of had a feeling just by talking to a few people online and a few other Toyota people out there that some of the four-wheel drive and two-wheel drive frames cross over. But there really isn't a lot of information out there. So I thought, hey, this is a perfect opportunity. You know, I got to take this truck apart. eBay Motors is basically giving me carte blanche to go through that site and pick what I need for this vehicle. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to solve all the mysteries right here in this video. What we're going to do is we're going to tear that truck apart. And I went out and I bought 2 different Toyota Tacoma frames. I bought the 2 popular two-wheel drive frames, and then that truck is obviously four-wheel drive from the factory. So what we're going to be able to do is basically strip that truck apart, put all 3 frames out, take a look at them. We're going to see how they're different, and then we're going to see which one we're actually going to use underneath this truck to fix it. But in order to do any of that, we first got to take that truck completely apart. So I'm going to start at the back, work my way to the front. Here we go. To bed off, you can really identify some of the rust on here. So this rust on this cross member, I mean, this is fairly bad. But this is basically surface rust. Coming from Canada, I can tell you this isn't bad. I mean, that's easily repairable just with a quick grind, fresh coat of paint. What you need to watch out for is stuff like this. So you can see right here, this leaf spring hanger. It's actually starting to rust out in between the hanger and the frame. And you can see that there's rust like coming out from behind it. What happens when metal rusts, it actually starts to expand. So it's actually gonna push this hanger right off this frame. Over here, we see a major problem area. This is a very common failure point for the Tacomas. What's happening right here is the crack, the frame is rusted right through here. There is a lot of pressure on this frame because of this spring pocket, because this is basically where your leaf spring mounts, and so the energy is transmitted from the drivetrain every time you drive the vehicle. So it puts a lot of pressure right here, and you can see this frame is actually starting to bend up right here. This frame is close to failing. You can actually see the crack coming through right here. The frame is bending up. This is normally where you see those Tacomas break right in half. You can see the previous owner did a quick little spray paint job in the wheel well to try to fool me, but I saw it when I bought it. That's why I got a good deal on it. You can see it's even worse over here, starting to come out from behind this spring hanger, and then the exact same problem right here, rusted out completely at this rear spring hanger. Frame starting to buckle up, and it's starting to buckle on the bottom too. Bottom's basically, you can pick it apart with your hand. So what would have happened to this truck if I had kept driving it is the truck literally would have broken in half. So you're driving along, all of a sudden it literally would have just split right behind the cab, which is what you see quite often on these Tacomas. So I'm really glad I'm doing this because, like I said before, I absolutely love this truck. So now I think the plan will be, I'm gonna go after some of the drivetrain next. So I'm gonna put it up in the air, I'll take the transmission out, take the transfer case out, take the drive shafts out. I have to work on these rock sliders because they are welded onto the frame, but there's not much metal from there when they were welded on. So hopefully I'll be able to cut those off and drop them. That way I can get the lift arms underneath the pinch weld. And then I'll work on disconnecting things like master cylinder brake lines, everything on the engine. I'll show you when we get underneath the hood. But right now it's going to be engine, transmission, transfer case. If I can get the engine, transmission, transfer case and the bed off and all that done today, I think that's a great goal for day one of this project. Because this is a project you don't want to rush. You want to take your time and do it right, because everything has to go back together before you're done. And everything has to hook back up. You can't cut anything. So with the, I want to show you some more rust on this frame. So back here you can see this is the inside of that C-channel frame. Look at this. This is terrible. This is basically what happens with with a frame when it starts to rust, is it just like expands out and just gets fatter and fatter and fatter, and that's exactly what is happening right here. This frame is basically expanding and rotting apart just from sitting there. Now up here, you can see up here, this is the inside part of the frame, and it's bad. Oh goodness, it's bad here. Basically pulling this frame apart as it's sitting here. This is the inside of that box section. It's rotten here. Now this honestly wouldn't be that bad because you have an entire outer structure, but when you come around here to the outer structure, you can see it's basically completely rotting right through here. And then what makes it worse is this has been painted, so you can't really see it, but this is like paper thin. I can push my finger through it. But look, like if you look at the rest of the truck, this is where it doesn't make sense. So if you look at the rest of the truck is essentially rust free. So, I mean, if you look up here, the floors of the cab, these look great. I mean, there's not a speck of rust on these anywhere. Normally you'd see a rocker panel rot out. There is no rot on these rocker panels whatsoever. It's just kind of crazy. I mean, it blows my mind that the frame is the only thing that is this susceptible to this rust. But it just proves once again that this is the right decision. So where I'm at right now is the bed's off. I got the transmission out, got the transfer case out, got both drive shafts out. I think this is probably a good stopping point for today. This is a good pile of work for day one. I think tomorrow I'll come in, work on getting the cab up and off, and then we can start tearing the rest of the drivetrain of this thing, and then we'll bring in our frames. All right, everybody, it's day two here in the shop working on the frame swap for this Toyota Tacoma. The goal today is going to be to get the body up off the frame, get it completely separated, probably pull the motor out, get it on an engine stand just so it's out of the way and I can roll it around. And then I'd like to get my other two frames into the building so we can get it all laid out so we can see the difference between all three of the frames that I have and basically talk through that. There is some modifications I need to do to my new frame because I have a couple plans for it. But let's get on to splitting the cab from the frame. Now, when you do take a cab off a body, you need to think about how vehicles are made at the factory. So at the factory, the way that vehicles are built is there's an assembly line that the frame goes down, and there's an assembly line that the body goes down, and then they're married together at the very end. Some connections are all taken care of, and then boom, you got a complete vehicle. So Modern vehicles are actually designed to have the vehicle body and frame split fairly simply. As a matter of fact, a Jeep JK, I can usually get the body off a JK in like 30 minutes. Now, I've never done a Toyota before, so there's probably going to be a little bit of a learning curve here, but here are the main things that you're going to have to take care of and watch out for. So I need to basically disconnect the brake lines from the master cylinder, because the master cylinder will stay with the body. I need to pull the AC pump off the motor, because the AC pump is also going to stay with the body. I'll have to deal with these brake lines over on this side, because there is a ABS pump over here. And I will have to disconnect the steering from the steering rack, which is way down in there. And then it's just a matter of going through and figuring out what wiring harnesses will stay with the frame and what wiring harnesses will go with the body. I think it's honestly just the wiring harness for the engine will have to come back out from the firewall and set aside. And then from there, I think I will have basically the body ready to, the cab ready to come up off of the frame. Like I said, I've never done this, so I'm just going to methodically go through it, and I'll talk you through every single piece as we do it, and then hopefully the body will come up easy peasy. Under the hood, you're going to have to deal with fuel lines for the engine, vacuum line for the brake booster. There's going to be 2 heater core hoses that go into the firewall. There's a power wire that goes into the factory fuse block on the driver's side. Obviously, the battery cables need to come off. And then you have to deal with some ground cables. There's always going to be a ground cable from the engine to the body. There's going to be a ground cable from the body down to the frame. In the case of the Toyota, it was right behind the battery. It goes down to the shock tower. A little bit of heat from a MAP gas torch will always help loosen up tube nuts on a brake system, but not put too much heat into it that it will actually burn through the line like an oxy fuel torch could. Fuel lines have quick disconnects right in front of the gas tank. The seat's got to come out so you can get access to the e-brake cables. I don't think you have to do this in a bucket seat truck, but in a bench seat truck, it has to be removed. Okay, so now I've gone through and basically done everything. There's some pretty cool things that Toyota's done with this Tacoma, and I want to show them to you. So first of all, let's talk about the engine harness. So the engine harness basically unhooked from the computer underneath the dash, came out from that connector right there, and now it is laying right here. As I said before, the power steering pump and power steering reservoir are going to stay with the motor, so that is fine. The brakes, I did not have to disconnect them from up here at the master. I did have to disconnect the clutch line, and I did that before I took the transmission out, so that's disconnected. But I didn't have to disconnect the brake lines here. Actually, there was one line right down here, and there's one line on the opposite side, and there's 2 lines underneath on the frame where the brake lines transition from the cab down to the frame. So those are disconnected. The wiring harness, all of this wiring that's back here for fuel pump and rear tail lights and everything, originally I was going to start pulling this off the harness and pulling it up, but then I noticed underneath there was a big rubber bulkhead connector right underneath the carpet there. So I followed the line. This basically wiring harness came out, went up this rocker and went up behind the dash, and there were 2 plugs that plugged into the fuse block and then 1 that plugged into a module underneath there. So that's unplugged and I've pushed it underneath. I've undone the e-brake cables, that's why I had to remove the seat, and now I have secured the steering wheel with a bungee cord so I can now disconnect the steering, and that way I don't have to worry about breaking the clock spring. That's basically it. It's very well thought out. So 2 brake lines at the front, 2 brake lines underneath. The e-brake cables, the wiring for the engine is now pulled back out. I believe the rest of my wiring will stay with the body when it goes up. I have 6 body mounts. It's basically 2 at the rockers, 1 at the front. And then I should be able to get it up. It's going to be a little bit tricky because, as I said before, I've got these rock sliders on here and I don't want to cut them off because I'm worried I'm actually going to cut through the frame. The frame is so weak behind them. I'm actually worried that I'm going to cut through a fuel line that's back in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to try and lift the body up on the frame with maybe a jack and then get a spacer underneath the body, and then I can get the lift arms in between there and lift it up. But yeah. So far, very impressed with taking this cab off. It actually wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. The only wires that ever became a problem were the wires that I had installed or added, basically for things like my backup camera and some other stuff that I added in the back. So now the goal will be to get it up in the air, disconnect the steering, and then we can start pulling body mounts. So where are we at right now? Well, we have a completely stripped down frame. This is what the frame looks like with absolutely nothing on it. The entire drivetrain is out. And now it's time, I gotta get these rock sliders off, but I'm gonna do that when I get it off the lift because I'm gonna cut them. And now it's time to basically get a new frame in here and start looking at some frames. So that is what I'm gonna do right now. Day 3 here in the shop, and where we're at right now with our Tacoma frame swap project is the truck has been completely tore down, bare 4-wheel drive frame sitting on the lift. And now it's time to bring in the 2 frames that I bought on the eBay Motors app. Now the reason that I bought 2 frames is because I said before, there's a lot of confusion as to whether or not you can use a 2-wheel drive frame on a 4-wheel drive Toyota Tacoma. So I did some research and I picked the 2 most popular versions of the 2-wheel drive Tacoma, and I bought a frame for each one. Now to make sure that I got the right frames, I used a tool that's in the eBay Motors app, and it's called eBay guaranteed fit. Now what that will help you do is if you put your vehicle's information in when you're searching for a part, if you see the little green check mark that says eBay guaranteed fit, you know that that part will fit your vehicle specifically. So I put in 2 different Toyota Tacomas, went looking for a bunch of frames. Now it doesn't just apply to factory replacement parts like these 2 frame assemblies that I bought. It covers a bunch of aftermarket and used parts as well. So when you're cruising through the eBay Motors app looking at the over 122 million parts that are in there, when you're shopping for something specific for your car, just make sure you look for that little eBay guaranteed fit check mark, and if you see it, you know it will fit your vehicle, and eBay stands behind it to make it right in case it doesn't. But right now, what we need to do is open up that door and bring in our 2 frames. What I have right here are 2 identical 2-wheel drive Toyota Tacoma frames for 2nd gen Tacomas. Now, they are for the same 2-wheel drive Tacoma, but there are some differences, and that is in the models. So, the one on my right, your left, this is off of a base Toyota Tacoma, and that Tacoma would have 5 lug wheels. The one on my left, your right, is off of an X-Runner or pre-runner Toyota Tacoma, and that would have 6 lug wheels, just like the 4-wheel drive one. The reason I bought these 2 frames is because with all my research, the question came up, is the 2-wheel drive frame the same as the 4-wheel drive frame? And I couldn't get a firm answer, so I just went ahead and bought 2 different frames so we could take a look at them. And there are some unique differences between the 2-wheel drive base and the 2-wheel drive pre-runner. If we look at the 2-wheel drive base frame, you can see that it looks very different than the 4-wheel drive frame that we have on the lift. The upper control arm mounts on the side of the frame, and then the lower control arm mounts down on the cross member, and there's provisions for a steering rack mount built into that front cross member, but there is no space for a front differential to fit inside this frame. On the other hand, our 2-wheel drive pre-runner frame, if we take a look at it, we see that the cross members on the front of this frame are virtually identical to the cross members in our 4-wheel drive frame. You can see we have the 2 mounts for the steering rack as well as the mounts for the front differential. We also have the upper control arm mount and coilover mount that looks the exact same as our 4-wheel drive frame that is up on the lift. If we come over here and look at the 4-wheel drive frame that's on the lift, here are the 2 bolt holes. They're the same as the 2-wheel drive pre-runner. This is for the steering rack. This is for the front differential right here and right here. And there's that front differential mount right back here. The upper mounts for the control arms and the coilover or McPherson strut, if you haven't modified the suspension, are identical. Here's the long bolt for the control arm to mount in right here, and our shock is going to mount right here. Bump stop and body mount is in the exact same spot. The next question is, are they the same on the back? And the answer is absolutely yes, except for one thing, and that is that cross member right there. Now, the reason that both of our frames have that cross member, whether it's the 2-wheel drive base or the 2-wheel drive pre-runner, is because these are both access cab frames or extended cab frames. And the reason that I have these in the shop is because for the life of me, I could not find a standard cab 4-wheel drive frame for sale anywhere that wasn't hit or bent or rusted out just like that one. Just couldn't find it. So I ended up buying these 2 access cab frames because I was pretty certain that the pre-runner was going to work. What I'm going to be able to do is actually shorten these frames up, or shorten this one frame up I should say, to match my standard cab frame just like it came from the factory. And the reason I can do that is because of how Toyota builds these frames from the factory. If you look at these 2 frames right here, even though the front of the frame is very different, the back of the frames are virtually identical. We have the 2 spring mounts, we have our spare tire mount, we have the shock mount, we have the bump stop. It's slightly different. This cross member differs slightly, but it's essentially in the same spot. We have our bed mounts here, and then we have our gas tank skid here and here, and then there's the cross member that carries the carrier bearing. The reason they're identical is because from the factory, what Toyota does is they build back half of the frames for almost every single Tacoma are the same, and they ship this back half frame, and then they adjust the length of it right here in this section to determine whether or not it's going to be an access cab, a standard cab, or a quad cab. They can also change it to be a two-wheel drive pre-runner, or a four-wheel drive just by sliding a different front end onto this frame section. Now we're going to be able to use this to our benefit because I'm basically going to split this frame right at that weld, take these frames, turn it into two individual frame chunks, and I'm going to weld it back together, making it the same length as our standard cab frame that's on the lift. And I'll show you how I'm going to ensure that it's straight when we get there. But first of all, step one, start cutting this frame apart. So to make my life a little bit easier, instead of wrestling basically two frame halves apart here, I took a measurement off the original frame, and I know that from that body mount up to the end of the new frame rail, when this gets pushed up into this new section of the front frame, I need 34 inches. So what I've done is I've measured forward 35 inches to give myself an extra inch of just sort of mess around room. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm basically gonna cut this frame off of here, and then all I gotta do is hammer out this section of frame, because it's gonna be easier to get this frame to come out of this section if I pull it this way or hammer on it this way. I can't do that as long as this whole rear frame section is still in place. So what I'm gonna do is I'll cut the bottom first. I'll just cut across the bottom of each side, and then I come over here and I'll cut along the outer edge, and then I'll cut the top last, and then I can work on getting these out. Then I'll essentially have two frame sections. I'll have my rear frame section and my front frame section. With my cuts done, you can see exactly how simple this actually is. Essentially, what happens is this rear C channel is going to slide inside of this sort of reverse C channel, and it basically butts up against this front piece right here. You can see it's kind of bent down to allow it to slide up into it. And then you basically weld it along here, weld along the top, weld along the bottom, and boom, then you have one full frame. I will need to basically grind this weld down, obviously here and there, to make it fit up perfectly. Now, I do know what the measurement is. I basically have to come off that body mount and come up here 34 inches to the edge of the weld, but actually on the one side it measured 34.25, and that's pretty common. But the question I have right now is, how am I going to ensure that my new frame has the exact same, basically, suspension pickup points as my old frame? To make that happen, I'm going to put my original frame onto my large fab table, take a bunch of measurements, and then I'm going to use some stop blocks to basically create a frame jig to test my new frame against. What I've basically done on my frame table is I've put together a makeshift jig. So what I have right here is I have these rear uprights, and they're locked in on that cross member back there with a couple of spacers. So that not only sets the height of the rear frame rail, but also how far forward it can slide, because they're basically tight up against the face. And then I did the same thing back here. I put these spacers tight up against this front lower cross member. And then I just took a whole bunch of measurements. I cross measured from the spring pocket up to the upper lower control arm mount. Same on the other way. Did a bunch of cross measurements. Did distance from the spring mount to the transmission cross member on both sides. Height of the transmission cross member up off of the table. Height of the frame off the table here. Height of the frame off the table back here. I'll probably take one more measurement on this cross member right here, get the height of that cross member and mark all of that down. Then what I can do is bring my frame pieces over. I can put the front frame section in place, basically lock it down with some clamps, clamp it down to the table, set the height to match where this one is right here. And that basically means that my table or my front frame section will be where it needs to be. Then I can take measurements off of that rear cross member that's back there, how far forward I need to cut it in order for it to slide together. Then I can slide them together, weld them up, and everything should be perfect. So now the frame is basically put back together. It's one piece again. You can now see how this keyed in section works here. Basically, it's just going to basically key back in, and I'm going to re-weld all of that, and that will make it incredibly strong. I used a ratchet strap to pull it in, keep it tight. But where I'm at right now is one leg is, based on my measurements, is 1/2 inch long, and the other one is 1/4 inch long, so therefore I'm at a square. So I need to shorten up that frame, that rear frame section, and then remeasure it and double check. I think the reason it's like that is because I didn't grind out this weld here on either side. I still have the weld that is here, and on the other side, it's actually a lot fatter. So even though this is pulled up here, it's touching here, not touching here. That's just gonna happen. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna double check my measurements. I'm going to take probably just under 1/2 inch off this side, just under 1/4 inch off their side. I'll put it all back together, and then I'll check it again. That's a great stopping point for day 3. Basically what we have is the chassis has now been shortened. It is cross-measured and measured 19 different times, make sure it's the right length, which now it's perfect. It matches the standard cab chassis completely. And now I have it mounted up on my fab table, locked down using the same lockdown points or stop blocks that I used for the original chassis. So the original chassis, I had it basically locked down with these two basically large dowels or 2-inch dowels. They locked it down, the cross member was pushed up against that, and then the rear was sitting up on those. And now I know that the chassis is the exact same position that the old chassis was, and I've clamped it down. I'll probably throw a couple more clamps on it just to make it good and secure. Then I'll go ahead and weld it up. We'll let it cool overnight, and then tomorrow we'll paint everywhere that is bare steel, because I do not want what happened to my last chassis to happen to this chassis. So we'll paint everywhere that's bare steel, and then we can start on reassembly. Day 4 here in the shop on our Toyota Tacoma frame swap. Where we're at, the frame is now the correct length. It's fully welded, and I've painted everywhere where there was bare steel. Now, I want to address one thing that is surely going to come up in this video, and that is whether or not I'm going to fully box this frame. Well, first let's talk about what does a fully boxed frame mean versus a C-channel frame. So if we look at the Tacoma from the factory, the front of the frame is what's called boxed. So we have a piece of C-channel on the outside of the frame, piece of C-channel on the inside of the frame. They're slid over and fully welded, and it basically creates kind of like a rectangular frame section all the way around. And then right probably halfway through the cab, it's not boxed anymore, and then opens up into this open C-channel frame. Now, if you wanted to box this frame, what would the process be? Well, it'd be pretty simple. You just basically cut plates to fill in this inside section, and you would fully weld them, both top, bottom, basically weld it where it meets the other section. You'd want to fill in all of the holes in the frame to prevent dirt and water and sand from getting inside. And when you met a cross member like this, you'd have to make sure that you tied into that cross member and basically filled in any hole. What does boxing do? Well, essentially boxing stiffens up the factory frame, prevents it from flexing. But I'm okay with this frame flexing. That's how it's designed from the factory. Remember, this Tacoma, it's like my adventure Tacoma. This is not a throwdown hardcore rock crawler. This frame is designed to twist a little bit in the back, and I'm okay with that. It's not a huge deal. I'm leaving this frame like this because of the end use of the vehicle. If I was trying to build a hardcore throwdown rock crawling Toyota Tacoma, I wouldn't even use this frame. I would throw this frame out and I would build my own chassis, either out of tube or 2x3 rectangular structural steel, and I would make it super stiff, and I would tie it into a full cage inside the vehicle as well. But that's not what I'm building here. But at this point right now, I am ready to fully assemble this Tacoma and get it back together and back on the road. And following the same procedure that we did when we took it all apart, I'm just going to take parts and start bolting them back on, and I'm going to work from one end of the vehicle to the other. Reassembly, it's just the opposite of disassembly. Everything that you took off has to be put back on. I like to keep all my parts organized when I do a job like this, so I put all the fasteners that come out of parts back into them when they're sitting on the floor. It's just a matter of bolting everything back onto the new frame. We're at a really good stopping point for day 4 right now. Basically, as you can see, drivetrain is going back into the rig, engines in, transmissions in, rear axles in, gas tank wiring, e-brake cables are all mounted up, all the hoses are back in. Basically, we're almost probably halfway done the reassembly. You'll notice that I haven't put the drive shafts in, I haven't put the transfer case in, and I haven't put the front axle in, and that is because I'm not only replacing the frame in this truck, I'm actually going to be making a couple changes to it along the way. So when I first built this truck, I put 529 gears in it, and now I'm feeling that that's just geared a little bit too low, especially just for the 35s that are on it. So I'm going to be stepping down to a set of 456s, and so what I've done is I've bought a full rebuild kit for both front and rear differential off of eBay Motors, and so that's what I think we'll do tomorrow. So tomorrow we will kick things off by rebuilding front and rear axle, then basically sling it into the truck, and then just basically continuing on our way of putting this truck back together. Hopefully by tomorrow, I think we'd like to have diffs rebuilt, them all reassembled, and the cab back on. New day here in the shop, and as I said before, I'm going to re-gear this truck the same time as doing all of this work, swapping the frame. So I figured, why not? I've got it all tore apart, might as well just go ahead and do it right now. Now, this truck originally had a set of 529s in it, which is just a little too deep of a gear ratio with the manual transmission in the 35s. I think what it needs is a set of 456s. I've kind of done the math all the way around. I think that's a good sort of middle of the road. A little bit higher than stock, which most of these trucks came with 410s, and but with larger wheels and tires. I just think it's going to be a good fit. So we're going with a 456. So that means I basically have to get a whole new rebuild kit and ring and pinion. So of course I jumped on eBay Motors, and I was able to pick up front and rear ring and pinion set, as well as install kits for both, and they all came in one box. So it's basically a complete truck re-gear package in one box for this specific model, being the 2005 Toyota Tacoma. I have my IFS diff out here on the bench, and it's just a matter of basically stripping it down. We'll go ahead and we'll install the new ring and pinion in this, and then I will have to take apart the rear differential to get that third member out to put the gears into it. Now, there's no locker in this differential. This is an open differential in the front, and that's just how I have always had this truck, because as I said before, this isn't a rock crawler. This is just kind of like my adventure truck. So I never felt the need to have a locker in the front. The downfall of having a locker in the front is that it can put excessive load onto things like half shafts and CV joints. And if this was a rock crawler, definitely have a locker. But because it's just an off-road sort of overlanding vehicle, I don't need a locker in the front. Worst case scenario, I can get out, pull the winch out of the front bumper, and life will be good. So first step right now, completely disassemble that front diff. So we've kind of lost a day in the mix here, and that is because as I was rebuilding the differentials for the Toyota, I realized that that was just going to turn into a super long part of this video, and I decided the best thing to do just to break that off and make it its own video. I've never done a Toyota differential rebuild on this channel, and as a matter of fact, I have two different Toyota pickup trucks to re-gear, one for a friend of mine and this one. So I thought, why not just break that off, make it its own video. So I'll probably put a link to it somewhere up here or in the description below, depending on when that video is going to come out. But where we're at right now is the entire chassis has been reassembled. So we basically have a full rolling chassis right now. Engines in, transmissions in, transfer case, all that kind of stuff. It's all done. It's back sitting on its tires and wheels. Now that means that right now it is time to put the cab back on the frame and make this thing look like a pickup truck again. Reassembly of the cab, it's just like the frame. Everything that you took off has to be put back on and reconnected. Cab is back on, all the body mounts lined up perfect. So this one's lined up, this one's lined up. If you're having trouble lining up your body mounts, get yourself one of these. It's basically something called an alignment bar, something called a lady's finger pry bar or a crow's foot pry bar. But the other end is a great alignment dowel. I just basically have to shove it up from the bottom. I got these two body mounts on the inside and they're lined up perfect. So this one back here, you can see right here. That's lined up perfect right there. The one in the front is the same. So now I can go ahead, bolt the body down. Once the body is bolted down, then I can just start hooking everything back up. Wiring goes back into the fuse block underneath the dash. Shifters go back into the trans and transfer case. Now on this truck, it didn't come with a manual shift transfer case, but I installed one out of an FJ Cruiser previously. That's why there's a shifter in the floor. Under the hood, obviously heater hoses, the radiator, wiring for the ECU's got to go back into the interior cab, vacuum line for the booster, and the cold air intake. E-brake cables, fuel lines under the cab, fuel line lock that basically keeps them safe. Brake lines, steering linkage. Front bumper winch. At this point, the frame swap is complete. Everything is bolted back onto the truck. The truck will have to have the brakes bled, the clutch bled, cooling system burped, and go in for an alignment. Now you'll notice that I have not put the truck bed back onto the back of the truck, and that is because, yes, the Tacoma had to come in here and get a new frame installed underneath it. The old frame was completely rotten. That was pretty obvious. But I'm not going to pull this truck in here and just swap a frame underneath it. I want to do something else to it while it's in here. So I want to do a couple little tricky, cool things to make this a true adventure Tacoma. And the first thing I want to do is try to figure out if I can fit a full-size spare up underneath the bed of this truck, and at the same time come up with a cool way to make it easier to raise the tire up and down in that space. So the tire right now is basically where it would sit in the factory location, and the concern I have is right here. There is not enough up travel for that rear diff before it's going to contact the tire. I was honestly concentrating on the width of the frame rails to see if I could fit this spare up in here, but it's not going to fit. Before I abandon the project though, what I do want to do is I'm actually going to put the rear bumper on and see if I can scoot the tire back and then just relocate the hanger that's basically going to pull the tire up into place. The truck did have a trailer hitch on it that I had modified originally, but honestly, I never used it in the 3 years that I had it on there, and I don't think I will honestly ever tow anything with this truck. I mean, it's a short wheelbase Toyota Tacoma. I mean, I might pull a little, maybe adventure trailer with it, but I doubt it. That's not what I do. That's not what I want to do either. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put the rear bumper on, and then I'll see if I can scoot the tire back. If I can scoot the tire back, then all I have to do is relocate the basically the tire catchment device. I think it's going to suck the tire up into the frame, and if that works, we are golden. So with the rear bumper on, we are golden. Now I can scoot this tire back into position, and we have tons of space up here for that axle to articulate. This is perfect. I may actually pull it off just maybe an inch off of that rear bumper. So all I have to do now is come up with a way that we can basically draw the tire up into position here. And for that, I have something that I think is going to make it super, super cool. Because not only will it keep the tire up and pull it up, but it will make it a lot easier to pull the tire up. So this will be awesome. This is nice. 35-inch full-size tire stored underneath the bed of the Toyota Tacoma. That gives me all the bed space I need. And I like carrying a full-size spare. I really, really do. I think it's good idea, especially on something like this. It's going to be my adventure machine. So I'm going to open up. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a couple pieces on the plasma table to start, and then we can start fabbing stuff up to hold this spare tire. Now I have my full-size spare ready to go up underneath the truck. I actually added this little tube here to act as a guide for the wire rope that comes out of the winch, just to make sure it makes that curve nice and easy and it's not binding when it's pulling up on the plate. I'll probably end up adding some wheel studs to that plate to help keep it centered in the wheel, but for now you can see that when I want to get my spare out, all I gotta do is lower the winch down, and when I'm done changing the tire, I simply pull the winch back up and we're good to go. Just to make sure that nothing bad happens, what I'll probably end up doing is adding some type of safety loop around one of these brackets. Basically, I may have to drill a hole in here, but it'll basically go down and just loop through the tire. Just in case the brake on this winch ever fails, the tire won't fall out underneath the truck. It'll have something that holds it up into place. But for now, we can move on to putting the bed back on after I give that a coat of paint. So this is it. It's our last day working on our Adventure Tacoma frame replacement project. Now the frame replacement, that is essentially finished. Everything is hooked back up. Everything works. The turned the key, fired up the motor, everything is good to go on that. The truck will still have to go out and get an alignment done to it because we had the suspension completely torn apart. I have to recharge the AC, bleed the brakes, bleed the clutch, and then make sure the cooling system is fully burped of any air, and then the truck is ready to resume its duties as my daily driver / adventure Tacoma. But I haven't put the bed back on the truck yet. Now, the reason that I wanted the spare tire up underneath the bed of this truck is because I want space in the bed of the truck. And that is because I've called this my Adventure Tacoma because I've taken it on a couple sort of like light duty overlanding trips, you know, maybe a couple days sleeping in the back of the truck, and it worked great. The bed of the truck has been what a lot of people refer to as a stealth camper. So you can build a full-blown overlanding rig, you know, have rooftop tent, full kitchen, all that kind of stuff that everyone can see and they know what you're doing and you look all cool when you're driving down the road and you can be off-grid for multiple days at a time. That's not what this truck is for. This truck is just basically, like I said, a couple days in the woods having fun. So by creating a stealth camper, that means you can essentially park this truck anywhere, climb into the bed, have a good night's sleep, wake up in the morning, and then all you have to do is be responsible for, you know, cooking your own meal before you get back on the road. And that is what I want to do in the back of this truck. I want to add stuff to make it better for those short little trips. So once again, I jumped onto the eBay Motors app and I started looking for accessories that I could put into the bed of the truck. And I found exactly what I was looking for really easily. I found a universal, basically overlanding kitchen setup that'll basically mount in the bed of the truck. It'll slide out, gives me a kitchen sink, place to mount my fridge, place to put basically something to cook with, cutting board, everything I would need. I found a dual zone fridge that has both a fridge and a freezer, so drinks and food can stay at different temperatures, so I can have cold drinks and frozen food in the back of the truck. And then I also got a little water system that holds like, I think it's like 15 liters, maybe about a gallon of water, which is all that you need if you're going to be off-grid just for a couple of days. So the plan right now is to basically take that truck bed, put it back onto the frame, take all these accessories, get it mounted in the back, so I have the ultimate Adventure Tacoma / stealth camper, and then we can take it on an adventure. Let's put the bed on a truck. With that, the frame swap on the 2005 Adventure Tacoma is 100% done. It is in desperate need of a front end alignment though, so much so I'm not even comfortable driving it on the road. Took it for a quick rip through the field next door to the shop and everything feels great. So I think once the front end is aligned, this truck will be back in service as my Adventure Tacoma. I do want to thank eBay Motors for being the sponsor of today's video. Without them, I don't think I'd even be able to do this job because I had to find that frame on eBay Motors in order to swap it in. And I know a lot of you are excited to see the stealth camper in the back, and I'm gonna do some more build out in the back. This got me super stoked. I'm gonna make a few more changes back there. But there is one more item that I do want to add to the back of this truck. And I figured instead of waiting for the Adventure, why not just do like a gear test run here, right in the field, right beside the shop. It's not a bad idea before you go on a long trip to test your gear anyway. So I thought, you know what? Let's fire up the kitchen and make a little lunch. I gotta say, it's pretty sweet. I think I should put a pizza oven in the back of every single one of my off-road rigs. Oh